Well, thank you, Sarah. Holy smokes.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I wanted to let that sit out there because, yeah, that one's really inspired me a lot. Because I think shamans, if you go into indigenous cultures and study what they're looking for often is to get to the root of the problem. They're not really interested in treating symptoms. They want to go all the way back to the spiritual root, like when did this first happen? And often that's how they would know, is when the person had stopped singing, that's when maybe a traumatic event had occurred, somebody they loved had been lost, maybe they became overcome by addiction, something happened. And I think those are also beautiful instructions on how to stay well, is to do all those things.
Gray?
I'm dying to know, where does Western medicine and your New World intersect, or do they ever?
Yeah, well, when people come, I have treated patients, when I have somebody who comes to me, or I don't really call them patients, but when they come to me and they have something like hepatitis or something where they are measuring something in a clinic, or maybe they're being treated for, I just had somebody recently being treated for infertility, and so there's a lab thing we can measure, like they're going to get pregnant or they're not going to get pregnant, or their hepatitis, they're I'm trying to think of a good measure, but a value of inflammation, like hemoglobin A1C. I guess I've never really treated anybody for that, but so if there's a measurable thing, I always encourage them to come a few days prior to their next visit, because then they can see what is the result of our work together. I have not collaborated yet with a physician and directly communicated with them, but I think that would be really neat to do. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but so sometimes, shamanic healing really works at the level of the spirit, and so I like to think of it as you're working way upstream from where all this solid stuff has been manifested, if that makes sense. So we're working above the, I guess we call it the assemblage point where the disease started, and trying to affect change there. And often in the healing work, for example, one of the more common things that the spirits will suggest is soul retrieval, and often when a person gets a soul part back that they lost, sometimes that soul part, and this may all sound just completely crazy, but I'm just telling you what I've learned, is that that soul part may ask that person to do something to honor it. So sometimes there's this reciprocity. There's this responsibility on the person's part to take some action. Sometimes it's to creatively express themselves. Sometimes it's to get up in the morning and watch the sunrise every day. I mean, it's just infinite, the things that have been suggested. And so I think, I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Sarah, I imagine that your family maybe has a menagerie of animals at home, or no?
We have a couple dogs. We do have a bird, and we do have chickens. Yeah, we've got a few.
Yeah.
We've got a few.
So I do have a question. I am, as I'm sure many in the room, have friends and family who've been affected by cancer. Most recently, a friend in the industry has been diagnosed with esophageal cancer. She's, as best I can tell, she's a woman, so I haven't ever directly asked her age, but I think she's probably in her mid to late 40s. And my 79-year-old father-in-law passed away from esophageal cancer almost 6 years ago. So when I heard about her situation, I could immediately sort of relate because of the experience that we went through. She's very positive. She's in the early stages of this diagnosis, okay? So her treatments literally have just started probably a week to 10 days ago. She's in the early stages of it. She's very positive. She's very encouraged. She's determined to win this battle. Her friends and family are rallying around her. She's been very open about it. You read her social media and she says, I'm keeping the faith, and people's comments are, we're sending you prayers, and there's a spiritual healing that I think she's expecting through all of this. Mm-hmm. I don't feel genuine when I just simply say, Wanda, my prayers are with you. You know, you can win this fight. I mean, I hope she appreciates the sincerity, but my question for you is, what else can I say to her? What else can I do for her? I think I might get her one of your books.
Sure.
But what else can I say to her that will maybe be impactful? Because I'm just concerned that this I don't know if it's enthusiasm, but this confidence, this determination that she has can wane, right? I feel like some of her toughest days probably are still ahead of her.
Sure.
With this, and it's tough. I want her to really fight the good fight and be able to fight the good fight. But she's going to need more than people's prayers, I'm afraid, you know, as wonderful as they are.
Yeah, and I think everybody's so unique in what they want, and it sounds like she's doing a really good job of rallying what she needs. And I think that's the main thing, is to remember that everybody's an individual, and some people, the journey of cancer may be extremely private. They don't want to talk, you know, they don't talk about it, or and other people, may rally their prayer chains and all that good stuff. One of the best things I read, now I can't remember the title of the book, but one of the best things I ever heard is that when this woman who had a diagnosis of cancer, she said the best thing that she ever heard, or the best message she got from somebody, was somebody who honestly just came up to her and just said, "This stinks, and I'm so sorry this is happening for you, you know, that this is just, I'm so sorry," you know. Mm-hmm. And I think being just true to yourself is the best thing you can do. So if it doesn't feel genuine, if it doesn't feel good, then don't do what other people are doing. Maybe wait until you know what you do want to say, and then say it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It could be just a note telling her how much you care about her, how much you admire her, you know, and that you're cheering for her and you're there, you know.
Thank you.
Sure.
Being a cancer survivor myself, I can tell you that positive attitude, a lot of it is to comfort the people around you, because you feel that you can manage it better, and you're glad it wasn't your sister, and glad it wasn't anybody else because of the journey. So not only what can you say to that person, can you give us some ideas about how to help them sort of, you know, they're exuding this positive feeling, they're sharing because they're practicing being brave, so to speak, but it's that, gee, it stinks. It's sort of reconciling that. So could you speak to that a little bit? I'm sorry I didn't mean to, but it was compelling.
Yeah, I think each one of us, like, if we just, sometimes I just like put my hand on my heart, and then like I can maybe know a little bit more about how to be or how to say things. And I certainly hope that nobody who has cancer or any other diagnosis has to feel that feeling of having to be brave for other people or having to be positive when you're not feeling it. And so maybe one thing we can do for patients or friends, family who have been diagnosed, that we get the feeling that they're getting tired of being brave, is just to tell them it's okay to not be brave. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be whatever you want to be. Like, I can just be here with you. And I think one of the biggest things, I remember when I was in South Africa and we sat with these sangomas, these beautiful women, and this is before I really had any faith or belief or any kind of understanding of what was going on. And I remember thinking, as we crawled into their hut and we sat there, and they were all just looking at us like, tell us what your questions are. And I remember thinking, we were in there for like 35, 40 minutes, and they paid like this rapt attention to us. And I thought to myself, I mean, if that's all we did for each other, is just sat and paid rapt attention to each other when we're in pain or we are suffering or we're scared or confused, it's like, that in and itself is like a powerful medicine, you know? And one thing I've learned on this journey is there are miracles, and then there are some of it, you know, there's a great mystery. We don't know. None of us know how much time we have. None of us know if we're going to get a diagnosis and we're going to get a miraculous cure, or we're going to die from a disease, you know? But I think what we can do as humans for each other is just to show up and be present and, and just breathe. One of my teachers once said, a person who knows how to breathe can save the world. I mean, just sitting silently with somebody and breathing for them, because maybe they're not having such an easy time, it can make a big difference. Yes.
Oh, I just, when you mentioned seeing Molly in the hospital, she was in hospice. I'm right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. What happened when she got her soul parts back? Did she continue on?
Yeah,
And
so-
I was just curious as to what happened to Molly.
Yeah, what happened to Molly? She died weeks later, and the family contacted me asking me to do the funeral, which really was part of an initiation for me, because I was really afraid at that point. I was very nervous all along of studying all these ways that somehow I would be cultural appropriation or taking tools from people that didn't belong to me. And so here I was being asked by a family that was native to give a funeral for them, and all these people came from their community. And I was so confused by that, because I was like, what? But it was all part of the magical, amazing hero's journey and the strange and magical things that will happen for you. And you can read really the whole story in Swimming with the Elephants, because I go into that. But Cleo and Molly and his daughters, his whole family has become, just like family for me. And really grateful for them in my life. They've taught me a lot of things.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey. I'm over here.
Yes. I'm sorry, the blinded.
And for your courage to walk the path that you've walked to do what you do. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And sharing that with us today. I think so much of what you shared is connected to both what Philip and Gray shared this morning. My experience and belief is that love is the most powerful tool that we have, the experience of connectedness. And I think part of, I'm thinking about the 30-minute session with the doc, or 50 minutes. And it's less
I
about...
give 90 minutes, by the way.
Oh, so you win!
Not to brag or anything. Sometimes we go for 2 hours.
And I'm not really sure what I want to say, other than I think it's not an either or. It's not about the numbers or the heart. It's about both. And that's part of what we're collectively missing, I think, is because we tend to kind of go into our silos. Who are we talking about that? We go into our silos of what we know and kind of miss the things that we can append to that to collectively do better for the people's lives that we touch. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm kind of interested in how the spiritual journey that you went on has impacted your family.
Great question. Oh man, when you change, you just take everybody along for the ride, whether they want to go or not. And I do go through that. If you're on a similar journey and you're curious about that, you can read Swimming with Elephants, because I do. But for example, when we downsized from that big fancy house, my 14-year-old was super upset because, it was the coolest house in the neighborhood. We could have like a 14-person sleepover, and we had a pool table. And he's like, why? And then when I quit my job, he was like, what you're doing is not a real job. Life coaches aren't legit. The only legit life coach is like Tony Robbins. And I was like, and it was really hard because I was scared he was right. I was like, my God, kid, you could be right. But I'm like, I can't help. I don't know what else to tell you, but someday you can buy a fancy house and you can go down that road and see if that's what makes you happy. But what I learned was it wasn't, And my partner, my husband, has been awesome. We've been on just a totally parallel journey. He and I kind of both came to the conclusion around the same time, thank God, like, what is this all about? And it's the kitchen. He was all on board with the kitchen. We're like, yeah, this will be great. And then we're like, whoa, that wasn't it, And it's just, it was hardcore. But I think now, and he's still practicing medicine and loving it and finding, despite all the challenges, he struggles with the time thing and the pressure to just produce, because he is like me, all of us, we have these hearts beating in us that want to love and connect with people. We want to sit and comfort people. We want to be there with people the way we want our mothers, our children, our fathers, our daughters to be cared for. And so he's riding those rails of trying to do the best job he can. And so Yeah, when you say yes to your hero's journey, just get ready, because and tell the people you love, it's not that I don't love you, but I'm changing and I can't really help it, but it doesn't, it's a journey for everyone. And so I could go on about the children. They still rag on me to this day. They'll be like, when we lived at the old house, we could have done that. And I'm like, really? Are you going to hang on to that? It's been like 8 years now. Come now. So we more laugh about it.
Do you find it hard, or do you ever try to explain what you're doing now through a Westernized viewpoint? We have new understanding in PNEI and how beliefs, thoughts, even spirituality can affect things. Or do you find it to be two separate worlds where you keep spirituality and that understanding? If you don't get it, that's okay. The skeptics are going to be there. Or can you cross boundaries a little bit there?
Yeah, like I often get people who will come, I wouldn't say this is the predominant persons, but sometimes when people will come and they'll be like, I'm totally skeptical. Is that okay? And I'll say, absolutely. I mean, that's how I started with this. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, what? It didn't make any sense to me. And what I say about shamanic work or this kind of spiritual work is like, it's experiential. Let's just see if you're willing. Let's just do this work and see what happens. And I just always ask people, just see what happens over the next couple weeks, or let's go to your doctor on Tuesday and see, what is your liver function? How are the liver functions looking? Or if there's some other measure that they're measuring. I think I think it's all kind of beyond words, and sometimes to put words to these things are not super helpful. So it's definitely something, if you're interested in it, go experience it. Find a practitioner, find something that you're, and see it. These ways are not a religion. Religion is where we have a dogma and we have a set belief, and there's board certification, and you're, I got the certification, so now it's not like that. It's definitely a learning that you do on your own, and your community certifies you. I mean, if they feel like the work you're doing is good, great. I mean, in the olden times, not so good. I mean, if your shaman didn't figure out how to find a source of water in a time of drought, sometimes that person was done away with, I mean, and we're very fortunate, I like to say, that in this time that we can explore these things safely. Not too long ago, in this land right here where we're living, which is Anishinaabe territory, their children were taken from them, and they were sent to boarding schools, and they were not allowed to practice for them it is a religion. Their drums were taken and burned, or they were jailed for doing these spiritual practices. So we're fortunate I feel very blessed to have the freedom to practice these ways and learn more.
Anybody else? Sarah, I just wanted to, one thing we've talked a little bit about is who's taking care of the doctor today. It's hard. We've heard a little bit of that, but I thought to just throw that back to you with your husband. You said, the time thing, and maybe other doctors in the audience will talk about, how do you feel about being a doctor today? And is it hard?
Well, I'll just add, I really think it's up to the individual. Nobody's going to come and save us. We have to change I guess for us what worked was to change our lives so that we could make it work, to find the space to explore the things we were interested in learning more about. But I don't know that our employers are necessarily going to stop and try to cultivate, what you need cultivated within yourself. So I think personal responsibility, but I think institutions can go a long way by creating things like sabbatical. Essentia Health, which is in our town, is marvelous in that at least you have an opportunity to take a sabbatical. I don't know how many people take them up on it. It's not paid or anything like that, but you can keep your benefits during that time. And I think having the space, a lot of people take sabbaticals and they come back refreshed with new ideas, and I think that's what we need right now.
I wanted to add, I've been practicing for 42 years. I pretty much retired July 1st of this year, and I enjoyed it more toward the end of my career, partly because of You guessed it, 30-minute appointments. But I think the way the job is crafted in many clinics nowadays is not very healthy. I happen to love the electronic medical record. Its potential for improving medical care is just tremendous. But the way, well, I won't name any people who are doing this, but the way the EMR is used nowadays is mostly as a coding tool. And so that's what we find ourselves doing every day. And it's frustrating, and it sort of takes a lot of the fun out of it.
Yeah, I had an experience where I went to somebody they had had a psychotic break and gone through a really, really difficult experience. And so then they were following up after the hospital to go see a nurse practitioner in psych. And I went to go with them just so I could, help them out and just to be present. And I remember the person started to talking about their experience, and the care provider quickly pivoted and began to type into the medical record. And I just thought, oh, this is like this sacred moment of this person telling you something like possibly the worst thing that's ever happened to them and how scary it was. But because of this dang medical record, we have to turn our back on them in this just precious moment where we could be present with them. And it's not the care provider's fault, it's just this crazy system. And I've heard that many people feel the medical record as a thing that's kind of come between them and the patient, which wasn't its intention, but.
Thank you. Any other questions for Sarah? Well, thank you, Sarah.